Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
He says he wants to double house building to 50,000 new homes a year, increase capacity on the transport network and the number of green spaces in London, along with protecting neighbourhood policing and keeping officers on the street.
It's a nice day, it's sunny.
But Labour were quick to criticise, saying the launch was thin on detail, making no mention of the number of affordable homes or social housing Zac Goldsmith would build, and containing no detail about rising transport fares. He says that by working with his Conservative colleagues, he's already managed to secure changes to government policy, meaning every high-value council home sold under the new right to buy would be replaced by 2 new affordable homes. And on strikes, a commitment that all Transport for London services would need half of trade union members to vote for industrial action before it could go ahead.
To be honest, it's a complete irrelevance. It's utter political posturing. We returned a ballot result of 97% yes vote and 83% turnout, twice the threshold they're setting out. So to be quite honest, if Zac Goldsmith wants to be taken seriously as a candidate for mayor, he should be thinking about how to improve industrial relations on the underground, not just posturing for political soundbites.
Let's pick up on that. Of course, one new idea that did come out for what you said on this week was this idea of banning foreigners. Well, that's what the headlines were, that you would offer to sell properties built on public land in London to Londoners first. How many properties would you be able to do over your mayoral term?
In all, or on mayoral land?
Yeah,
we need about 50,000 homes a year.
How many would you be able to do on that kind of mayoral land?
We think that on TfL land, we don't have all the figures yet because the Land Commission hasn't reported, so we don't know exactly how much GLA land there is or where it is, how much TfL land there is or where it is. We have an idea that if you put all TfL land together, it would be the equivalent of about the borough of Camden. The figure that we have been given is around 15,000 a year on mayoral land. But
not 50,000 as was reported by some newspapers this week. 50,000, did you see that?
I saw that. You can't.
But your campaign retweeted it, which seemed to endorse it.
50,000 homes we need each year.
Well, I know that, but on this public land, you've got a pretty good idea.
I'm talking about TfL land.
Yeah,
we don't know about GLA. Right. We don't know about Ministry of Defence.
TfL land. You know that TfL planned or say they can build 10,000 homes in 10 years. Zac Goldsmith says he can do 15,000 on this land in 4 years.
That's based on all kinds of assumptions which I challenge. For example, we know that if we were to extend the Sutton tram link, it would open up the possibility of around 20,000 homes. But that money isn't there. TfL can't afford that. We know that if we...
And you think you'd be able to extend that line in 4 years?
We would be able to borrow against future property taxes. That's why I took the Chancellor to Sutton to make this case. I can't tell you I've won that argument yet, but the fact that he came to Sutton to hear the arguments, to talk to businesses, to hear the case, I think is a very good sign.
It's a very ambitious figure, isn't it? You accept it's an incredibly ambitious figure.
It's extraordinarily, of course, it's very, very difficult. To build 50,000 homes a year, full stop, that's double what we're building at the moment.
And on these ones...
So I know if it wasn't difficult, it would have already been done.
On these ones on TfL land, now, will they all be to buy, to sell?
No, you have a mixture.
You will have a mixture?
Absolutely, you need a mixture.
There will be rent there as well?
You need to have rent. I mentioned in the action plan, which is not incidentally a manifesto, it is a list of priorities.
Yes, fine.
The manifesto comes later in the campaign. You need to have a mix. You need to have affordable, you need to have market, you need to have intermediate, and in each of those categories you need to have for sale and for rent.
And how will it work? How will it work? Are you saying that it should be for people who have lived and worked in London for 3 years, or What's the deal?
I'll give you an example. Look, all the details of this will emerge in the manifesto, but I'm going to talk about the principles.
Have they been worked out yet, then? You've worked them out?
Mostly worked out, but we know that this is possible. If you look at, for example, pocket houses, pocket homes, they are sold to Londoners. There is a residency test. This was a condition imposed by some of the boroughs in which they operate. So in Ealing, for example, they're producing homes for first-time buyers who are Londoners, who've passed a residency test, and they're selling for around £150,000 without subsidy. In Camden, they're more expensive because because it's a more expensive borough, but they're around 240, 245,000.
Who can show that they've been resident here for 3 years?
And they have to demonstrate that they have been resident here for
Not
a
working,
period of
or
time.
working as well?
Not necessarily working, but they have to be resident here.
And how long? 3 years?
In that instance, it's 3 years.
And it's not necessarily working. Someone could, because it was presented as that, reported as that, I'm presuming from briefings from your team that it's people who lived and worked in.
We haven't briefed any details because we're going to release the details in the manifesto. This is a principle. There is no point using up valuable public land, building homes, and then having those homes bought by outside investors.
You know the kind of place London is. People who are resident here. There will be a lot of, presumably, EU citizens could apply for this.
Yeah.
Presumably a Chinese millionaire whose daughter is working here as a chemist.
This is what we're trying to do, is to limit. You can't be too authoritarian about it. We're trying to prevent a situation where valuable public assets are developed, where homes are built and they're bought by overseas investors who have no intention of using those homes.
Okay,
so this is, it may be an exaggerated political concern in some quarters, but it is causing massive resentment across London.
Well, you raise that point interestingly, because you'll know that Boris Johnson says there is no real problem. It involves a tiny percentage of...
We don't have the figures on that, and no one has...
So you can say you don't agree with him on that, then?
I don't agree that it's not a problem. I think it is a problem, and it's also a cause of real resentment. When people... I had a surgery this morning with someone earning almost double the average London salary, who is moving out of London because he can't afford a home for his family. That is a crisis.
And then you've talked about your figures overall for housing. You think you can double it? And
I think we must double it.
50,000 or by the end, in your last year, you'll be able to be building 50,000 homes. We're about, as you say, half of that. Now, you say that a significant number will be for rent, affordable rent.
Yeah.
What will that be? Give us an idea. Give us your minimum target.
I think the Olympic Park is a good indication. So it was a Labour-controlled council, and it's been over 10,000 homes have been built, and you have it's based on the criteria third. So a third affordable or social, in fact, a third intermediate, and a third market. And within those categories, it's almost 50-50 in terms of sale and rent.
So broadly, but that would be your model. That will be a model that you aim for.
It is a model, but I'm nervous of targets because targets don't work. So Ken Livingstone, I'm going to make a political point. I apologise, David, a man I respect enormously, but Ken Livingstone made very ambitious targets around affordability. He didn't get anywhere close to meeting them. Boris made no targets, and he exceeded Ken Livingstone.
That's not true, because of course the London Plan has a presumption that 25% at least should be affordable. Just give me a commitment.
No manifesto promises.
Give me a commitment on what percentage you would guarantee would be for affordable rent.
I'm not going to give you a commitment or a figure on that.
An aspiration.
The model I think works is the one that we've seen in the Olympic Park.
Which is 30%, 33%. But you're not prepared to offer.
Let me just answer the question in broader terms. The entire emphasis of my focus on housing will be to deal with this issue of affordability, where Londoners on average or even higher than average salaries cannot afford to live in their own city. That is a social and a business crisis. It's a problem. So the entire emphasis on my housing programme will be to deal with this affordability issue, to enable Londoners on average income to get on the housing ladder.
Should we see how far you get? Now, you've made let me just address this, because the last bit on housing, just for the time being almost. The point you made on Tuesday, you made again today, is that you're the person that through persuasion and through cooperation with the government, you can persuade the government to deliver on really important things on housing, 3 of them. You said you got 2 for 1, you'll get 2 properties built for 1 that gets sold off under these right-to-buy plans. You haven't got a commitment that those 2 will be rented. You haven't got that commitment. You haven't got a commitment that all the money raised from the sale of properties in London will stay in London. These are the crucial areas, and you haven't persuaded anyone.
But hang on a second. If you're asking me to justify the entire housing bill, I'm not going to do that. My job as a London MP and as a mayoral candidate was to knock that bill into shape so that it worked for London.
But you've done nothing really. The things that the real experts want, they want the money to guarantee before we go to the polls that you keep all that money in London and that you get those 2 properties that they are for rent and that they are in the same area as the one you lost.
If you're asking me, is this a perfect bill, I'm not going to say that it is, but I have massively improved that bill for London, and even organisations like Shelter will have said so. Organisations that are unhappy with the bill, and many of the components.
But are you unhappy that you've only been able to go so far and not no further?
What I have done is I've ensured that whenever a high-value council house is sold, that money is not going to be siphoned away to the disadvantage of London. Now, London is used to funding the rest of the country. We keep 7% of of our taxes. The rest goes out to central government, and we have to beg for some of it
Let me
back.
just bring-
But in this instance, it means that we have a guarantee now. The details are being worked out. We have a guarantee that every high-value council home sold will lead
David
to
Lammy
2
was there
affordable homes
taking
being
part
built.
in that debate on the housing bill. That amendment that he put through about, with some assurances, was adopted by the government.
Doesn't amount to much. How is Zac defining affordability? Is it 80% of market value, as Boris defines it? Or
As the
should it
government
be
defines it.
50%? How many houses? Do you believe in social houses and council houses? Why have you extended right to buy to housing associations?
Let's leave
These
those
are the
then.
big questions, Zac, and you're not answering them. Sadiq is, but you're not.
Answer those.
So social housing, of course, is an extraordinarily important part of London's housing ecology, housing mix. And on average across London, nearly a third of our homes are social houses. But the reality is that the constituent I met this morning, who's earning over the average salary, will never qualify for social houses. They are no more attainable or affordable to him than Roman Abramovich's mansion in Chelsea.
So is
So
it
would
80%?
he will never qualify.
So can you just be on? So you will be honest about this. That over the next 4 years, your emphasis will be very much
It will be on
houses to sell.
mixed communities. It has to be. But affordability is
But
absolutely
we can't.
general.
You can't give us any provision.
Okay,
You're
if
not
you-
giving
if
any
you-
assurances about social rented or
in every
affordable
part of
rental.
London, in every part of London, there are going to be different needs. If you're going to reduce this argument down to market versus social, then you're going to miss out the vast majority of people in the middle. But that is the argument that we're having with the Labour Party. at the moment.
I
It doesn't
think
make
when
sense.
viewers
Briefly, no.
hear you say affordable, they want to know what you mean by that, and you're not defining it.
But-
I think they
okay.
want to know genuinely how you're going to build. I also think they want to know where you're going to get the money. Sadiq said he's going to have a bond issue. Where are you getting the funds to actually get building?
So affordability is very
Where's the money
different from
coming
one
from?
borough to another. So James and I part represent Kingston. We have social homes that have been sold for £750,000, £800,000. In Richmond, we've had social homes sold for even more than that. You put a 20% discount on one of those homes, they're not affordable. So the legal definition is the one that you've just given, but I don't believe you can have a legal definition that is meaningful for Londoners, because London is too diverse. I gave you the example of the pocket homes. 150,000 thereabouts in Ealing, 240-something thousand pounds in Camden. Exactly.
Good. Let me
the
just
same
ask
product.
James about this.
The 20% discount in one area is going to be meaningful. In another area, it will
What
not.
do you want, James, in your neck of the woods? What do you want? Is your emphasis? Do you want to see the emphasis shift very firmly towards that sort of ownership, that's tenure? Are you not at all concerned about how little emphasis there might be on affordable or social rented, as we used to know, that housing?
Well, I don't think there is a lack of concern there. I mean, in Kingston, in our local authority that Zac and I share, 40% of my casework, including my surgery this morning, is about housing. Our local authority is building more social housing, but we need a mix. We need social housing, we need housing.
Your authority is
that's
building
affordable.
housing at 40% of the market
No,
rate.
social housing.
Is it? Really?
Yeah, and they have plans to do a significant estates regeneration scheme that will involve making our current estates high density with high quality homes.
Are you worried that most spare bits of land are going to have to be used for starter homes, because that's where the government's big idea is now, and so that local authorities will be a bit hamstrung in getting money for affordability because they've got to go down the starter home route?
No, I think what's important is that we get a mix of housing, so you do have some starter homes. And again, I have people in my surgery whose kids are desperate to get into the housing market and desperate to have starter homes. It's really important that we have them as well. It's about a mix of social, of affordable to buy and affordable to rent.
A couple of other things while we have you here would be interesting, and we'll explore these later in the campaign as well. Where are you? What kind of commitment? We had a Conservative MP here last week, was it the week before, saying we expect an announcement from Zac. Watch this space. He'll say something about fares and the cost of transport at some stage. Can you tell us that you... Or what's what do you assume you're going to have to do in terms of putting fares up to pay for investment?
I know that I face an election in 13 or 14 weeks' time, and I know that there are an enormous number of people who would like to hear me say I'm going to cut the cost of travel or even freeze it at 2016 levels. But I know that if I were to make that pledge, either I'd break it if I got elected, or it would be catastrophic for London if I didn't break it. And
Right.
the reason for that is we've been talking about housing, but in fact, the only way we're going to be able to deliver the housing solution is by unlocking land across London, and the only way to unlock that land is through
Which is why
transport
I'm
links.
wondering whether you're able
So-
to actually say, to let people know that we need to expect, realistically...
Realistically, we cannot expect fares to stay where they are. They
What
will not
about,
be
so
present.
can we expect fares to be going up by inflation at least, but probably by a rate above inflation, if you want to deliver what...
I imagine, look, we haven't been through all the figures, of course, which is why I'm resisting making a pledge on fares. I don't think Sadiq Khan
Well,
would
you
have
haven't gone through the figures now,
But
when are you
Sadiq
going to do
Khan
that?
hasn't been through the figures either. is I don't believe any of the candidates have had access, let alone had time to go through all those figures. I'm not making a pledge on fares because I know, as my rivals know, it's not an honest thing to do. The reason I don't know what David's view is, but I haven't yet met a Labour figure in London who believes it's possible to freeze fares, as Khan has promised he would, for the next 4 years.
Well, hopefully we'll be speaking to Sadiq Khan next week, and we'll be trying to establish that. Can I ask you just one other thing while we have here, please?
We take £2 billion out of the budget. £2 billion. So what are you going to not then do? Is it the upgrades of District Line, Circle Line? Is it the night tube? Is it the overground to Barking?
Why do you accept that as a given? Why aren't you standing up to? I thought you'd be able to persuade government. Why aren't you saying to government you cannot afford to take this money out of?
Ultimately, London depends on government. You work within the envelope that is set by government, and you fight for the biggest.
I thought you were independent. I thought you were going to stand up and be awkward.
Unless you imagine the mayor printing money, which I don't think is part of the job description. My job is to make sure it's as big an envelope as possible.
I've been